Let me ask you something uncomfortable. India hasn't condemned the strikes. India hasn't supported Iran. India hasn't called for a ceasefire at the UN Security Council. India hasn't even issued a formal statement on the sinking of a warship that visited our own ports weeks ago. So the question here is India playing dumb or is India just playing chess? The case that India is playing chess. Here's what the Indian foreign policy establishments, the bureaucrats, the diplomats, the NSA would tell you if you got them in a room off the record. Move 1. India is quietly buying discounted Iranian oil. With Iran under fire and desperate for revenue, Iranian crude is being routed through Oman and Turkey at heavily discounted rates. India has been the world's most sophisticated buyer of sanctioned oil. It did it with Russia after 2022. It knows the playbook. While the world screams, India's refineries quietly process and partially offsets the $120 barrel pain with below market Iranian crude. Move to Chabahar is India's biggest quiet leverage. India has spent years and billions building Chabahar Port in Iran, its strategic gateway to Afghanistan and Central Asia bypassing Pakistan entirely. By staying silent, India protects Chabahar from becoming a casualty of the war, both literally and diplomatically. India's bet whoever wins this war will still need Chabahar, and India will still be there, having offended nobody. Move 3. NSA Ajit Doval's back channel. India's national security advisor has a well documented history of operating in the shadows while the official position stays neutral. India's intelligence channel with both Iran and Israel have historically remained open, even when their public positions diverged. The silence at the podium does not mean silence in the room. India may be a quiet mediator positioning itself for when both sides eventually need a neutral back channel. Move 4. The Israel arms pipeline must not be disturbed. Israel is one of India's top three defense suppliers: drones, missile systems, and surveillance tech. With a hot war on, those defense contracts and technology transfers are more valuable than ever. India cannot afford to antagonize Israel publicly. And with the US, India's biggest trading partner and the country whose approval India needs for semiconductors, AI chips, and even green technology, public neutrality is the safest lane. India's strategic doctrine: never pick a side in someone else's war. Be useful to both, charge accordingly. The case that India is playing dumb and it will cost us. But here is the other side. And this is what the critics and quietly some retired diplomats are saying. Problem 1: 8 million Indians are not a negotiating chip. They are human beings. India's silence has left 8 million Indians in the Gulf with zero clarity on evacuation plans, consulate support, or even government communication. Now compare this to 2006. Operation Sukoon evacuated 2,000 Indians from Lebanon in days. Where is that urgency now? Problem 2. Silence has an expiry date. Both sides are now openly asking the India to choose. The US has hinted that continued arms tech transfers depend on India's public posture. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba, has reportedly sent a private message to Delhi. Neutral is not neutral when your prime minister was photographed with my father's killer 48 hours before the strike. Every day India stays silent, the cost of eventually speaking goes up. Problem 3. India's strategic autonomy has never been tested at this scale. India played the same card with Russia Ukraine, buying cheap Russian oil, staying out of condemnations. It worked because Europe needed India as a pressure point on Russia, and America needed India for the China equation. But this time, the war is in India's own neighborhood: Indian Ocean, Indian diaspora, Indian food supply. The buffer zone is gone. Strategic ambiguity works when you're watching the fire from across the street. India's house is literally next door. So, what is India actually even planning? Based on what diplomats, defense analysts, and foreign policy insiders are reading between the lines, here is what India's actual play appears to be. Phase 1: right now. Stay out, buy time, and buy cheap oil. Let the US do the heavy lifting. Don't make enemies, keep supply chains moving through alternative routines. Phase 2: when ceasefire talk begins, enter as the neutral mediator. India has relationships with both sides, uniquely positioned to host or facilitate back channel ceasefire conversations. Think of how India positioned itself during the Russia Ukraine grain corridor talks. Quiet facilitation, maximum economic benefit, and zero potential cost. Phase 3, post war. Claim the reconstruction prize. Iran will need to be rebuilt. Iranian oil infrastructure, ports, cities, all damaged. India's construction sector, engineering firms, and pharmaceutical exports are already positioned to be the first movers into a post war Iran. The country that didn't bomb Iran and didn't condemn Iran gets the first call when the rebuilding contracts go out. Now, here's the most honest thing I can tell you about India's strategy right now. The silence is not accidental. There are very smart people in South Block in Delhi, in the Ministry of External Affairs, in the NSA's office, who are running scenarios right now. And that calculation is cold, calculated, and in a purely strategic sense, rational. The question is not whether India has a strategy. The real question is whether the strategy is big enough for the moment. Because right now, India is trying to be everywhere and being nowhere. We want Israel's drones and Iran's oils and America's chips and the Gulf's remittances, and for the moment, we are even getting away with it. But wars have a way of forcing decisions that strategy books cannot prepare you for. And on the day that India is forced to choose, everything you just heard in this video will determine the cost of that choice. If this video helped you make sense of what's happening, share it with one person who's been asking, what exactly is going on in Iran? This is their answer. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Meanwhile, log in into 21x Academy and join the waitlist because the platform is going live soon for a global learning experience across sectors.